I used to believe that forgiveness was proof of strength, that if you could rise above the hurt, you were somehow the better person. That's what my parents always told me growing up. Let it go. Be the bigger person. She's your sister. Those words were drilled into me so deeply that I started confusing silence with maturity, and tolerance with love. But the day my sister crashed my new car, I realized something. Sometimes forgiveness isn't strength. Sometimes it's just exhaustion dressed as peace. The car wasn't just a car. It was my first real achievement that didn't have their fingerprints all over it. I'd saved for it myself, every paycheck, every late night, every missed hangout, every moment where I told myself, just a little longer, it'll be worth it. I wasn't chasing luxury. I was chasing proof that I could build something on my own. That I could exist without needing my parents to approve. That I could stop being the family's afterthought. When I first saw it, silver, clean lines, that soft new car scent, I remember thinking, this is mine, mine. I even took a photo of it in the driveway because for the first time, I felt like I'd earned my own space in this world. My sister laughed at me for it. It's just a car, she said, rolling her eyes. But I saw the flicker in her expression, that half smirk that only shows up when she wants to feel above me. She's always had that look. The one that says she could ruin me and my parents would still defend her. It was a Sunday when it happened. I was in the kitchen half asleep, coffee in one hand, scrolling through messages when I heard the door slam. She came in, keys jingling in her hand, face pale but jaw tight. Don't freak out, she said. Those 3 words always mean one thing: something's already ruined. My stomach dropped before she even said it. I took your car, she continued, just for a quick drive. I wanted to see how it felt. My heart was already racing, but then she added, someone came out of nowhere. I couldn't stop in time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at her. She was waiting for my reaction, like she always does. Waiting to see how much she could get away with. I walked outside, my legs numb. And there it was, my car, the front end crushed, headlight shattered, the hood bent like it had been folded by a giant's hand. I felt something inside me collapse. Not anger, not yet. Just this hollow disbelief. That car had been the one thing no one had touched, no one had mocked, no one had taken credit for, and now even that was gone. When I turned back to her, she shrugged. It's just metal, she said. Insurance will cover it. And then, God, I still hear it. She smirked. That little smirk that said you'll forgive me anyway. And she added, Mom and Dad will make you. That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not like in the movies. It was quiet. The kind of snap that changes your breathing, that burns behind your eyes but never reaches your lips. I didn't yell. I just looked at her and said, get out. My voice didn't even sound like mine. She rolled her eyes again, muttering something about how I was overreacting. That word, overreacting. It's the one she's always used to shrink me down when she knows she's crossed the line. The one my parents echo when they want to keep the peace. Their version of peace anyway, where she causes chaos and I absorb it. I thought maybe, for once, my parents would understand, that they'd see what this meant to me. So when they got home, I told them everything. The car, the crash, the smirk, the words she said. I was shaking by the time I finished. My mom sighed first, that heavy, disappointed sigh that always comes before a lecture. Honey, she said, it's just a car. My dad nodded, adding, at least she's okay. Things can be replaced. Things can be replaced. I stared at them, realizing they weren't even angry. Not at her. Not even a little. They were already turning it into another family moment. The kind where I'm expected to play the role of the understanding one, the mature one, the forgiving one. My mom said, you know your sister didn't mean it. Just let it go. My dad added, we'll talk to her. But don't hold a grudge. Family is family. And there it was. The script I'd lived under my whole life. The one that always ends the same way: her mess, my forgiveness, their comfort. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, do you even hear yourselves? But instead I just nodded, because that's what they expect. I went upstairs, locked the door, and sat on the floor. My hands were trembling, but my chest felt frozen. I remember staring at the wall, whispering to myself, they couldn't. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. They couldn't make me forgive her this time. But you know what happens in a family like mine. Silence gets twisted into guilt. The longer you stay quiet, the more they say things like, you're still upset. You're holding on to negativity. That's not healthy. They make your pain sound like a flaw. Like you're broken for feeling. And slowly you start questioning your own hurt. You start thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I should just move on. I almost did. I almost said the words just to stop feeling like the problem again. But then I saw my sister a few days later in the living room, laughing with them. She was retelling the story like it was some funny anecdote. Oh my God, you should have seen her face when she saw the car. They were laughing. My parents were laughing. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, invisible as always. That's when the anger came. Not the wild kind, the cold kind. The kind that settles in your bones, because I realized, they didn't just excuse her, they enjoyed it. They liked the version of her that made everything a joke, even when it came at my expense. That night I didn't eat dinner. I stayed in my room and thought about every moment I'd been told to let things go. The birthday she ruined by showing up late and blaming me for being too sensitive. The time she told my friends something personal about me and laughed when I cried. The time I finally stood up for myself and my dad said, "Don't start drama." Every single moment where I was told my pain was less important than her comfort. It all came rushing back, and suddenly it wasn't just about the car. It was about the pattern, the cycle. The way they had built her a throne made of my apologies. The way they'd trained me to be the cushion for her consequences. And I was done. The next morning my mom came into my room. "You need to talk to your sister," she said softly. "She feels terrible." I looked up at her and said, "No, she doesn't." My mom frowned. "You can't know that." But I did. I'd seen her face. I'd seen that smirk that said she already won. When my sister came to apologize, it wasn't even real. She walked in like she was doing me a favor. "I didn't mean to," she said, "but seriously, it's not that big of a deal. You'll get over it." Then she smiled. That same smile she gives when she knows they're all watching. The one that says, "Look, I'm being the bigger person." I said nothing. She sighed dramatically, turned to my parents, and said, "See, she's still mad, you guys deal with her," and that was it. She left, no apology, no remorse. Just performance. That's when I understood. They didn't want peace, they wanted quiet. They didn't want resolution, they wanted control. I think people underestimate how painful it is to realize your family only values your forgiveness when it benefits someone else. They tell you that holding boundaries is cruel, that speaking up makes you difficult. But no one warns you that being the bigger person eventually turns you invisible. I stopped calling family dinners. I stopped explaining myself. My parents called it pulling away. My sister called it being dramatic. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they called it. I needed distance. I needed to see who I was without being constantly told to shrink. There's something strange that happens when you stop playing the family's script. At first, they don't take it seriously. They assume it's temporary, another phase, another mood. But then, when you don't cave, when you don't apologize just to keep the peace, they panic. They start rewriting the story. Suddenly you're cold, you're selfish, you're holding a grudge. But they never ask why. They never ask what it cost to keep forgiving people who never change. Weeks passed. I got the car repaired myself, paid for it out of pocket. No one offered to help, not even with the insurance. My dad said, "You're independent now, right?" That word, independent, suddenly felt like punishment. Like they'd weaponized the very thing I was proud of. I remember standing in the driveway the day I got the car back. It looked perfect again, at least on the outside. But when I sat inside, it didn't feel the same. The smell of new leather had faded, replaced by something stale. Maybe it was in my head, but it felt like the car remembered, like it carried the weight of what happened, just like I did. A few days later, my sister posted a photo online, her smiling next to my parents, captioned, "Family over everything." I stared at it for a long time, not out of jealousy, out of disbelief, because that was the story they were choosing. The photo perfect version where we're all happy, united, forgiving. The version where my silence equals harmony. But I knew better now. I knew that behind every family over everything post is someone like me, quiet, tired, and done being the emotional cleanup crew. I started saying no. No to family gatherings. No to fake apologies. No to the endless guilt loop that demanded I prioritize their comfort over my peace. At first it felt lonely, like I'd stepped out of a room I'd lived in my whole life. But slowly, that loneliness turned into something else. Clarity. I realized that I'd been seeking validation from people who never looked for me. That my entire life, I'd been begging for acknowledgement from a family that only saw me when I was useful. And it wasn't until I stopped trying to be seen that I finally started to feel free. They still call sometimes. My mom says things like, "Your sister misses you." My dad adds, "We don't want this distance." I listen, I nod, but I don't go back. Because I know what distance means to them. It means not having me there to absorb the tension. It means they actually have to look at the imbalance they built. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever understand, if they'll ever see that forgiveness without accountability isn't love, it's erasure. That you can't demand peace from someone whose boundaries you've trampled. That maybe, just maybe, I'm not the one who broke this family. I'm just the first one who stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. I think about the car sometimes, about how something can look fixed but still carry invisible cracks underneath. People are like that too, families especially. You can polish the surface, repaint the story, pose for the photo, but the fracture remains. And that's okay, because healing isn't about pretending it never happened. It's about refusing to let it define what comes next. The truth is, I don't hate my sister. I don't even hate my parents. I just stopped needing their version of love. I stopped mistaking tolerance for connection. I stopped believing that family loyalty means abandoning yourself. Some days I still hear her voice. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me. And every time, I smile. Because now I know something she doesn't. Forgiveness isn't something anyone can make you give. It's something you choose when your peace is ready, not when their comfort demands it. And maybe one day I'll choose it, maybe. But not because they told me to. Not because it keeps the family picture clean. But because I finally found peace in knowing I don't owe anyone my silence anymore. I used to think healing would come when they finally understood. When my parents would sit me down, look me in the eyes and say, "We see what you went through." When my sister would actually mean it when she said sorry. Not because she was told to, but because she felt the weight of what she did. I waited for that moment like it was a rescue boat that would finally take me off the island of loneliness I'd been stranded on since I was a child. But the longer I waited, the quieter it became. And somewhere in that silence, I started to understand that maybe healing wasn't something that had to come from them at all. Maybe it was something I could give to myself, even if they never changed. For so long, I needed them to validate the pain they caused. Every word, every slight, every dismissal, I needed it to matter to them. Because if it mattered, then maybe I mattered too. I'd replay conversations in my head, rewriting them into versions where they finally got it. Where my mom would say, "We were wrong to minimize your feelings," and my dad would admit, "We should have protected you more." But reality doesn't rewrite itself no matter how much you imagine it softer. Reality stays sharp, and sometimes the only way to stop bleeding from it is to stop holding the blade. It's strange the way clarity arrives. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand epiphanies. It slips in during ordinary moments. Washing dishes, walking alone, sitting in silence. For me, it came one afternoon while I was driving. The car was quiet except for the hum of the engine, and I caught my reflection in the window. I looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix, but the kind that comes from years of trying to make people see you. I realized I'd spent my entire life trying to prove my worth through their recognition. Every achievement, every calm response, every swallowed truth, it was all for an audience that never clap. That's when something in me began to shift. What if understanding didn't have to come from them? What if it could come from me? From the part of me that already knew the truth, even when they refused to say it aloud. What if I could stop needing their permission to feel what I felt? The first thing I did was stop explaining myself. Every time my mom said, "You're too sensitive," I used to respond, defending my reaction, trying to make her see that being hurt wasn't a flaw. But one day I just didn't. I let the words hang in the air, heavy and wrong, and I didn't chase them with explanations. And that silence, that deliberate choice not to fight for my right to feel, felt more freeing than any argument ever had. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about conserving energy for things that actually mattered. Understanding myself started in small moments like that. Realizing that my worth wasn't tied to how gentle or forgiving I could be. That setting boundaries didn't make me cold, it made me honest. I stopped apologizing for needing distance. I stopped shrinking my truth to make theirs more comfortable. And little by little, I started to hear my own voice again. The one that had been drowned out by years of, "Let it go," and, "Don't make a scene." It's easy to believe healing is loud, that it's crying until your body shakes, or confronting the people who hurt you. But sometimes healing is quiet. It's making a cup of coffee and not thinking about them. It's driving past the place where it all went wrong, and not feeling your heart twist. It's realizing that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the ability to exist alongside it without letting it rule you. There were days when I doubted it. Days when I'd see families laughing together and wonder if maybe I'd given up too soon. Maybe if I just tried one more time to explain myself, things would be different. But then I'd remember how every one more time before had ended, with me drained, misunderstood, and somehow the villain in a story I never wrote. Healing meant breaking that loop. It meant choosing not to walk back into the fire just to prove that it still burned. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Not for anyone else to read, just for me. I wrote the things I could never say out loud: how betrayed I felt, how small they made me, how much I wanted to stop feeling like the problem. At first, it hurt to see the words on paper, but then I realized those words weren't ugly, they were proof of my survival. Every page was a piece of me I'd reclaimed from their version of the story. Understanding myself also meant facing the uncomfortable truth that I had internalized their voices. Even when they weren't around, I'd hear them in my head. "Don't be dramatic. You're overreacting. She didn't mean it." Those echoes had lived rent-free in my mind for years, shaping how I saw myself, so I started talking back to them quietly in my own head. "No, I'm not overreacting. I'm responding to years of being dismissed. Yes, it matters because I matter. It felt strange at first, like arguing with ghosts, but slowly their voices faded and mine got louder. Healing also meant unlearning guilt. The kind that made me believe it was my job to fix what I didn't break. My family was built on unspoken rules. The youngest causes chaos, the oldest cleans it up, the parents keep the peace. I had carried that role for so long that letting it go felt like rebellion. But guilt is just loyalty to a story that no longer fits. Once I realized that, I started letting it fall away, piece by piece. People like to talk about forgiveness like it's the finish line of healing, but I don't see it that way anymore. Forgiveness isn't a performance. It's not saying, "I forgive you," to make others comfortable. Sometimes it's just understanding why someone is the way they are, and choosing not to let it define you. I don't need my sister to admit what she did. I don't need my parents to rewrite their version of events. I understand them now, their limitations, their blindness, their need to protect the illusion of harmony. And because I understand them, I no longer expect from them what they can't give. There's a strange kind of freedom in that acceptance. When you stop demanding understanding from those who refuse to see, you make room for your own clarity. You start noticing how much of your life you've spent waiting for people to change instead of changing your own patterns. And when you start changing, everything shifts. The conversations you tolerate, the boundaries you keep, even the way you talk to yourself. All of it starts aligning with the version of you that no longer needs validation to feel whole. I began doing things that reminded me who I was before I became the family's emotional caretaker. I took long drives with no destination, played music loud enough to drown out the old noise, spent hours sitting by myself without reaching for my phone. There's something sacred about solitude when you've spent your whole life surrounded by people who make you feel unseen. In that quiet, I met myself again, the version of me that laughed easily, that dreamed without guilt, that didn't need to justify her joy. Some nights, I'd think about the car, about how it once symbolized independence, then loss, then renewal. It became a mirror for everything I was learning, that things can break, be repaired, and still carry the memory of what happened. Healing isn't about erasing the cracks. It's about learning to see them as proof of strength. Every time I drove it after that, I felt a sense of ownership that went beyond the vehicle. It was about my life, my choices, my story. I stopped hoping for apologies that would never come, not out of bitterness, but because I realized I didn't need them to move forward. My peace wasn't waiting in their hands. It was sitting quietly in my own, just waiting for me to notice it. The moment I did, everything started to feel lighter. There's a deep relief in no longer being misunderstood because you've stopped explaining yourself. The weight of trying to make others see your truth can crush you. Letting that go feels like learning how to breathe again. You start realizing that being unseen by them doesn't mean you're invisible. It just means you're looking in the wrong direction. I learned to see myself differently, not as the too sensitive one, not as the difficult one, but as the one who felt deeply enough to notice what others ignored. The one who refused to normalize hurt disguised as family tradition. The one who chose peace even when it meant standing alone. That's not weakness, that's clarity. Healing for me isn't a straight line. Some days I still ache for the family I wish I had. Some days I still crave their approval like a reflex I can't unlearn. But then I remind myself that healing isn't about never feeling the itch again. It's about recognizing it and knowing it doesn't control you anymore. Understanding myself means recognizing my own patterns, my own triggers, my own capacity for empathy, and using them with intention, not obligation. It means choosing where to place my energy, who gets access to my time, and how I define love on my own terms. When I stopped asking them to understand, I stopped standing in the rain waiting for an umbrella that was never coming. I started building shelter for myself. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was mine, and that ownership, of my emotions, my choices, my boundaries, that was the real beginning of healing. Sometimes people ask, don't you miss them? And I do. But I miss the version of them that I imagined, not the one that exists. I miss the idea of family, not the reality that hurt me, and that's okay. Missing what never was doesn't mean you have to go back to it. It just means you're human enough to still hope for softness, even after hardness. Every step I take away from their expectations brings me closer to myself. Every time I choose silence over argument, distance over drama, truth over tolerance, I heal a little more. Not because they changed, but because I did. Because I stopped trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding me. Because I finally realized that my peace was never something they could give me, only something I could create. Healing began the moment I stopped asking them to understand and started understanding myself.